Hi, I'm Eric Christian Olson, and I'm here on behalf of Harvard Sea Change to talk with some amazing folks who were recently named Climate Creators to Watch by Sea Change and Peak Action. So this annual list recognizes content creators who are producing original, entertaining, and educational content that's reshaping the climate narrative, combating misinformation, and empowering people to take climate action. Today, we are talking with four of these creators: Isaiah Hernandez, Nicole Kellner, Colin Donaldson, and Mackenzie Marguerite. Collectively, these creators reach over 3 million followers on social media, and each of them has an incredibly unique take on how to talk about climate change. So with no further ado, let's dive in. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you got involved in the climate movement.
So I grew up here in Los Angeles, California, and my parents had immigrated from Mexico. We grew up in poverty, living in Section 8 housing. And I would say that when I was young, I remember being told that I couldn't really go out because of the toxic smog that was in my neighborhood nearby the facilities. And I'd say that my environmental kind of activist career started to do when I was in middle school. I started to actually work as an assistant with my dad as a teenager gardener, and we would actually clean a lot of affluent people's homes around LA, like Calabasas, like Bel Air, just Beverly Hills, for example. And I remember like growing up, always being asked like, "Why are you working? Like you're so young," as like a teenager. And I was able to pass by as an adult because I looked like 18 because of my height. I was like pretty tall back then. I started to realize like, wow, all these environments have access to clean air, water, and soil, and they're very affluent, meaning that they worked really hard in life to get to where they want to be. And I started to realize like, is this like by accident that everyone that is poor, black and brown, people of color deserve to live here? Is it more systemic, or is it more just like you didn't work hard in life, that's why you deserve to live here? And so in middle school, when there was a 2008 wildfire, I think it was called the Sayre Fire in Sylmar, that's where I live nearby. I remember this very crazy scene where I was in middle school eating this pizza. Now, out of nowhere, the sky was all pitch black, and then like out of nowhere, the ashes started to fall in the sky, and I looked up and I said, never in my life have I seen ashes as like a weather phenomenon. So I then realized like this is actually about the wildfires, and I started to research about climate and science. And so in high school, I'd say that that's where my development to start to protest and start to become like a language accessible translator for my community to learn about environmental issues got me really motivated. And then, high school, I had a lot of mentors that told me, if you want to make change in the world, you have to go study the environment. And so I did environmental science at Berkeley to,
Yep.
to think that that's a way to kind of save the planet. And then I realized no wonder people don't like climate change or don't care about it, because it's so confusing to learn about it. It's unappealing. And so I realized after college, like I wanted to create digital creations to um, amplify and to make environmental education accessible. So I created social media to kind of poke fun at the ways in which we are learning about the climate crisis and how we can actually build it more sustainably.
That's amazing. That's such a fantastic answer. And what a lot to carry in middle school, like those realizations. Can you talk a little bit, because I think this is a word that I, when doing research about you, I think that needs a universal definition, which is ecological wealth. You
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I popularized a lot about ecological wealth after realizing that in the United States, anyone who's born in the United States or starts immigrates to the United States, you hear about the American dream. The
Yep.
American dream, right, goes back during the industrialization era. You could actually look back at it with the Great Gatsby book that popularized the American dream. And it's funny because if you watch the film in 2009 that came out with Leonardo DiCaprio, or 2013, I believe, back when I was in high school, they glorify the ideas in which you're able to benefit from this industrialized era. And it was really great for a lot of people, right? A lot of people were able to get very affluent. Some people were able to go from lower income class to middle class. And so there's a lot of great opportunities. But what I realized now is that the American dream may not be as sustainable as we may think about it from an environmental standpoint, right? I have a lot of friends that grew up with generational wealth, and I'm so proud that they had financial security growing up, because I think any generation or any parents, any grandparents would want their kids to not suffer from what they had to go through when they were younger. So the idea of ecological wealth kind of attacks generational wealth in the sense that what we're trying to build in generational wealth is not ecologically sound. A lot about the generational wealth conversations about build as much capital as you need to do, regardless of what you have to do to get there. So a lot of the examples of generational wealth is making exploitative companies that are not only degrading the planet, but they use slave labor that are Black and brown people of color. And it's, you would say that the animal violations that are so extreme there to create this type of wealth. And so ecological wealth to me is actually a cultural framework that actually adds value to living systems. And it looks at like valuing the fungi, fauna, and flora that are so rich in not just the ecological wealth and how we see it in capital, but in the ways that we are actually able to create a relationship with. And so to me, ecological wealth started to come from the fact is that when I was a young kid, I remember this presentation I did where they showed me 5 brands and then 5 plant species. I was able to name all the 5 brands, but I was not able to name any of the brands. I mean, any of the plants. So to me, that meant that I was losing ecological knowledge.
Wow. Wow. I know that as we have these conversations that it can be pretty daunting. And I know a lot of young people, that's not even true. I know everyone is feeling discouraged and overwhelmed. How do you balance that? Like, how do you speak to the realities of climate change without installing that sense of doomism that so many of us feel when we're overwhelmed?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the idea of like going back to your heritage and your cultural values, right? Everyone has culture, everyone has heritage in which our parents or grandparents or even our siblings or friends have taught us the ways in which we should be living. And I think for me specifically, the ways in which I've navigated is actually doing work that I love, right? I love working as an environmentalist, but I really love the intersection between creativity and social media. So for me, I found a community through there. But I would say that for the general individual who may just be working 8 to 5 job is that they align themselves specifically with the career that they want and to change that career as much as they need to do, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm just one individual. I cannot change the entertainment industry. I cannot change the fashion industry alone. I cannot change these other industries that a lot of people are in, that my friends are in. So I tell them, like, inspire yourself to start to ask those questions, but also to really love that work that you're doing, because at the end of the day, like, I see so many Gen Z and millennials now are not choosing to work at corporations or they're not aligned with their values. So to me, it's like, if you really want to take that stance to navigate this anxiety, is to, yes, openly talk about it, but 2, it's like to start changing what you can that is accessible to you. And I'm not asking people to be like a systemic change person either. Like, not everyone's going to do that, but you can definitely read about the laws that are going on and to vote and to also use your platform for a privilege.
Yeah, that's amazing. And a call to, I think, the living the best version of our lives, right? Which is how do we choose to use this bandwidth, this fleeting, spectacular life that we have, that we're dedicating it to the things that matter and doing a job that echoes our values. Do you have thoughts on that, Nicole?
So my route to the climate movement is a little circuitous. I don't have a background in climate. I studied like advertising and communications in college, and like started my first business when I was 18. I started like a handbag brand that was like this purse that you could use your phone through. And then like after college, I co-founded an after-school program to teach kids how to code, and, kind of like fell in love with the education side of things through that. And, with teaching kids how to code, we were constantly breaking down these complex computer science topics into smaller bite-sized information. And like during that time, I did a zero waste challenge and decided to like live zero waste in New York for a month. And that was like my wake-up call, where I was like, oh boy, there's a lot of work to be done. This is overwhelming. Like, I want to make an impact in this space, but I have no idea how. And
Wait, before you even move on, I have so many questions. So your zero waste month, when did it go sideways? When did you realize, oh, this is going to be impossible? And what was that moment?
I mean, like day 5, I tried to like cook beans from scratch, and it took a full day of like sourcing them, cooking them and then cooking the meal from them. And I was like, this is ridiculous.
That's incredible. Sorry, I had to know how that went. So day 5 is when it got really difficult. And you went for 30 days. You did it for 30 days.
I did. Yeah. It was, I mean, it was such an interesting experiment, and I'm really glad I did. I learned a lot very fast. Yeah. And so from that point on, I was on a mission in some way to find my way into the space. And I sold that after school program in 2019. And I found the community, this like podcast called My Climate Journey. And they had just launched a Slack group. And I got really involved in the Slack community and met some amazing folks. And I ended up finding like my first climate job through that community. And so I started working at a company called Climate Finance Solutions. And they are a consulting firm that helps companies secure non-dilutive funding, like grants, to develop and scale climate solutions. So it was like the perfect like foot in the door. I was working part-time and learning a lot. And that was all during like COVID. So I was like living with family at home. So part-time was like good. And then I moved back to New York and I was like, okay, time to go full-time on climate. And I found a role at a company called Dashboard Earth, which was a startup that helps people like take climate action. And I was doing the thing I worked so hard to do. I was head of ops at this climate startup, and
Head of operations?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've been doing operations pretty much my whole career. Like with the company I co-founded, I was like COO, and like with the consulting organization, I was chief of staff, like always very like logic, ops. And I just like think some part of me was like ready to do something different and a little more creative. And so for fun, I decided to start painting a watercolor a day for 100 days. And 10 days in, I painted about kelp and carbon sequestration. And I posted it on Twitter, and I had like 400 followers at the time, and I got 100 likes. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. And I decided to do the rest of the 90 days about climate change. And it just like started taking off. I was growing like 1,000 followers a month. And I started getting private commissions requests from like startups and climate VCs, to the point that it was like, I think I could quit my job and actually do this full time. And within 4 months, I quit my job, and I've been doing climate art full time. And basically I break down these like complicated climate concepts into like watercolors that communicate them in a really simple way. And I do that for all sorts of like nonprofits and organizations. And yeah, I love it so much.
That's incredible. What an amazing arc from chief operations. But it's still, you're right, because you're taking very complex ideas and bring them down into something digestible. And I think, that first job where it was teaching kids coding, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's very similar to that, but in using your superpowers for good. So that leads perfectly into that next question, which is that, can you share with our viewers a bit about your process and why you chose specifically watercolors? Was it just that you did this 100-day challenge, or what do you feel with art that makes it so digestible for people?
Yeah, so I grew up loving art. I took art all through like elementary to high school. I took AP art, and I took like, on the weekend, my mom drove me into Philadelphia and took a college level art class, because I was into it for sure growing up. And then when I got to college, I actually wasn't allowed to take art classes. I went to Penn State, and it's so big that if they let anyone take like a practical art class, they just wouldn't have space for the art majors to take their own classes. So I lost touch with it for a long time. And I actually was traveling in Malaysia, and I was like on a solo travel trip for 8 months, and did kind of one of those like paint by numbers, like paint and sip, but without the sip, watercolor classes. And
just paint,
just paint, but with
no
like
sipping, just
mild
painting.
abstraction. Yeah. And it was honestly the first time I remember being taught how to do watercolors. I don't think we did a lot in high school. I did a lot of like charcoal and pastel. I liked the like messy art. Like I was just always covered in like charcoal after art class.
Yeah, that's half the fun.
Yeah. And so this was the first time I had done watercolors and I just fell in love with them immediately. Like it just really resonated with me and I found them so calming, and I picked it back up during COVID, just like as a way to kind of like find peace during the chaos. And then, you know, I did them a little while I was like at home with my parents, like during COVID. And then, when I moved back to New York, Omicron hit that winter. And that's when I picked them up more consistently again for that 100-day challenge. And I found that the way of combining the climate, like the topic of climate change with the like vivid, bright watercolors that I choose to use has this like calming effect for the people that look at them. And it like almost like it allows people to bypass the fear part of the climate topic that I'm sharing and softens it. And so that's what I've heard from a lot of people, that they really like can find that I'm able to like blur the line of that scary topic in this like playful way.
Approachable and digestible.
Yeah.
Perfect segue. Your 5 favorite pieces that you've done so far.
My like favorite one, I don't even think is in my book, but it's about the IRA. I did a painting about like when the Inflation Reduction Act passed, and I was able to kind of like show a house and all the individual benefits of what that house would look like if it was like implementing all these like impactful
solar credit, 30% tax credit, and that's this one I'm looking at, right? And electric vehicle, 7,500. This is amazing.
Yeah.
This is the definition. I can put it up there. We don't even need the technology. This one, yes. I'm on your Instagram. I've got it.
That one's pinned. It's one of my favorites for sure. And then
2-person home with a combined income of $150,000 in New York City. And this is all the savings you can get by just.
Oh yeah. Okay. I got it. It's this one.
Yes. Okay. So we're all going to look at that and celebrate it with joy. All right. We can do the next one. Number 2.
Heat pumps. Explain how a heat pump works. Like I'm a 5-year-old. That's also pinned on the top of my Instagram. So that's easy for you.
A gnome pulls a little heat from the cold. Dumps hot air inside the house to heat it. The gnome snacks on electricity to keep going. That's right. That gives me warm fuzzies. And the greens and the blues and the clouds are always very calming.
Yeah.
Okay. And then 3.
So this is like a fan favorite, but this is a pun now that I just said that, but it's the renewable energy. I'm a big fan.
I'm here for it.
Just so simple, and people like it. I think they're bringing lightness and silliness to this topic is like my whole vibe. So that one's a classic. And then what am I on? That was 3, right?
That's 3.
Okay, I got this. ABCs of climate.
I got it here. I'm looking at it right now.
That one was so fun to make. And thinking of all of these was like a fun challenge. And yeah, I at one point remember I put like cows farting instead of burping, and it caused like ruckus on Twitter because cows' emissions are more based off burps than farts, even though it is technically both. There are more. And so I had to redo the painting to appease Twitter.
I love that Twitter called you out and said, no, most of the methane comes from is it from chewing of cud, right? When they redigest it and spit it out and the methane comes, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, the way that they burp it. Yeah. And so there's like, people are developing technologies so that they burp less. There's like seaweed is one of the ways for feeding cows, is actually like helps them burp less. And last one is whales and carbon sequestration. This was like one of my, that's buried deep in my Instagram because it's not pinned. It's from like February 2022.
You just have to show me then. What is it again?
Yeah.
Show me.
It's whales and carbon sequestration, and it talks about how whale poop feeds phytoplankton, and that how phytoplankton are like they absorb about 40% of the carbon in the air. And so it's basically like about the ecosystem of how whales are amazing. And I did this while I was like on vacation with my parents in Florida, and I just love the water and the ocean so much. So I did a ton of paintings. Like this page is probably one of my favorites in my book because it's just like about blue carbon, and painting water is my favorite thing to do. Yeah, so that was, did I do it? I got all 5, right?
Got all 5. And now I'm buying the book. So what advice would you give viewers about building a social media presence and finding your niche within this climate space?
I think for me, I really found like combining 2 random things to be the thing that works really well for me, where it's like, who would have thought fun, vibrant watercolors and climate change would be like the thing that makes me stand out or makes someone stand out. But it's like finding what makes you unique or what you love a lot, and just like thinking about how it can tie to this massive challenge. Because I mean, I know that me as an individual, I can't change everything, but it's like, what can I do to like chip away or like help communicate at a larger scale than just myself? Yeah, so that's been like something that I found helpful.
Can you tell us about the book and where we can find it?
Yeah, it's called A Brighter Future. It's on, if you go to NicoleKellner.com, it's probably the easiest way. It's like on my website and links to the publisher directly. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way. Or if you go to @NicoleKellner on Twitter, it's right there as well.
And you can go to your Instagram, which is @mindfulNicole, right?
Yes.
Amazing. Colin, what's your POV on that?
So born and raised here in Tampa Bay on St. Pete, kind of had a job working on St. Pete Beach, renting out cabanas and jet skis to, tourists that were visiting. And they would come up to me every single day and be like, this is my favorite place in the world. You have the best job. I love bringing my family here. But then I would literally watch them leave all of their trash in the sand when they went to go fly back to whatever state they're from. And it never really made sense. I was like, why would you treat your favorite place in the world like that, or show your family like that's how you would treat your favorite place? So I started picking it up one day on Instagram, and I was mad. I was like yelling at it, like, why are people doing this? Why are people coming and visiting and littering our town? And then I went to a beach cleanup, and the dude that was hosting the beach cleanup, I was like, man, how do you deal with like the frustration of it? And he's like, listen, we're all mad. You just got to fight this with positivity. And I was like, that is not going to work. And then I tried it, and it did work. And I just noticed that people wanted to feel part of a bigger movement as opposed to feel like they're the issue. And so that's kind of what I took the approach of talking about on TikTok, and in doing that, I just kind of took off, and I have a really, really young audience who are super passionate about this.
First off, I love so many parts of what you just said, which is the recognition that people can love a place, but also destroy it, which is the complexity of the human condition. But also approaching complex and difficult situations with positivity, and how the circumstances of that don't change at all. It's just how we decide to view it and how much of a difference that makes. So I celebrate both of those things. What is the unique approach to creating climate content? Do you have a set of guidelines that you use? And what do you think, as far as the work that you've done, what best resonates with audience as far as those guidelines?
Yeah, I love taking the climate optimism approach. I think it's the most settling for people watching these videos. And I think it's the easiest for them to consume in terms of like realizing what the issue is, but feeling like there is something that is being done, or there's things and steps forward. So that's kind of how I was always approached it. And again, like I said, I have a younger audience, so I really like to bring a lot of energy. I mean, I'm talking about trash, so there's only so many ways I can make trash sound interesting. So it's adding things like the sand and personifying different treasures that I find. And then a lot of is also tied into, directly to marine life, what I talk about. So sometimes I'll come across seabirds or dolphins, but I love coming across like sea turtles, baby sea turtles, and expressing like why trash affects them, or why we're digging holes, or sea turtle safe lighting, why that's important. And I think that has what resonated the most is like showing how our actions and our decisions are affecting these animals directly, and being able to like kind of firsthand showcase it. It's one thing to sit on a green screen, which I think is also equally as effective, but to be there at all, it just hits like a little bit harder.
What's your top 5 pieces of content that has resonated the most, but also you're the most proud of as far as relaying information, optimism, and your POV and values?
Yeah, I think actually all 5 of these videos landed in a series that I did early last year. So last year I challenged myself to pick up trash every single day of 2022. And early on in the year, I kept going on. This was like around January. I kept finding plastic beach toys. So I went to my audience. I was like, well, I keep finding all these toys. What should we do? And everyone's like, make a toy box. So I crafted this toy box out of wood that I found refurbished all around town, made a little toy box, put it on the beach. And I was like, we did it. This is cool. Next day, the city took the toy box off the beach. And I had to go to TikTok. I was like, they took it. I don't know what to do. And then I got 2 suggestions: start a petition, and then go try to pass the ordinance at your town hall to add the toy box to your beach. So I was like, those are 2 great ideas. So I did both. And by the time I went to the town hall, the video had 5 million views and the petition had 6,000 signatures. And I pitched it to them and they were like, for our little beach, this is how much attention's on it. And I was like, yeah, we got to I would love to tell my audience that this is going to happen. So they accepted it right there, unanimous yes. And so I was able to walk my audience through like, we saw a problem, we tried something that didn't work, and then here's how we fixed it, and like actually walked together through the process of like getting involved in your local town community.
That's action steps.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the most difficult things about climate change is like we can acknowledge a problem, but the steps A, B, C following that are much more difficult. And some of it seems so large, but if you just tackle the thing that's in front of you, what is your equivalent, or what is people's equivalent to their local beach? Like, how do I handle it? So I haven't seen this series. I haven't watched it yet. So then the toy box is at the beach?
Yeah. And some other beaches surrounding here now have also got on board and have put on their own little twist to toy boxes around here as well.
So then people put the toys in the toy box and then they can leave them there so they clean up after themselves.
Mm-hmm. And then if kids don't have any toys to play with at the beach, there's a whole box full of them.
Yo, that's a win-win.
Yeah, right.
That's got to feel good. Congratulations, man.
Thank you. It's really cool. That's the same reaction the town council had.
They should be, because they probably don't hear anything as exciting or have anything that quick to fix, and people are passionate about it and involved. Like listen, that's democracy at its best.
Exactly. And that's such an interesting point too, because in 2020, so I started my account in 2019, December 2019. So it spilled into the early stages of it in 2020. Simultaneously, I was going through a lot of stuff that was like really just getting me down in my personal life. But I remember I would just go to the beach every morning, just stand in the sand, watch the sunrise, and then just pick up trash. And I remember it actually like resetting me and like regrounding me and knowing that I'm a part of something bigger. And it really helped me like get through a lot of those things. And so I tell a lot of people, like, what's your favorite part about cleanups? And I'm like, it's really your mental health that it affects the most. Like, you just get out there, do something good to start your day. Like, you're really going to see the effects of it super fast.
Yeah, that's purpose. And on the larger sense, that's identity, right? Is that you're out there constantly doing something for the betterment of humanity. And that means a lot. What advice would you give to viewers about building a social media presence and finding a niche within that climate space?
Yeah, I would say you first should just find something you're passionate about, something that directly links you to what you want to talk about. And because that passion is going to fuel your tone, and it's going to fuel like how you approach things. And then secondly, just really focusing on your community at first. The idea that you're going to fix the entire world off of your content is such a giant mountain to climb, and it's unrealistic. So finding what you can immediately kind of impact where you're at, and then you'll watch your community improve, and then throughout your content you'll see it spread into communities that are people taking action based off of what you're doing. So yeah, just find what you really care about and never stop talking about it.
I totally get it and recognize it and celebrate it, and it's such a cool, inspiring, and I think that your approach to it and the way that it makes you feel all that stuff is fantastic and amazing.
You got me smiling over here.
Mackenzie, bring in that forensic science POV onto that.
So I have a background in marine science. I grew up in Hawaii, so I grew up with the ocean. My educational background predominantly looks at marine conservation and coral restoration. And from there, I started working as a marine naturalist, which is somebody who is quite capable of identifying species and then identifying their behaviors and explaining that to people. Typically, a marine naturalist is somebody who does tours. So that's what I did. There's other jobs that you can have as a marine naturalist, but I was a touring naturalist. So I would take people on tours, show them the love of the ocean. And in those moments, in showing people how amazing the ocean could be, particularly people who had never seen the ocean before. At one point, I worked on a submarine, and that was just an incredible experience because it's people that can't even swim, have never seen the ocean before. We can take them in the submarine and show them 100 feet beneath the surface.
Where was this? Where was this magical submarine you were taking?
So it's a touring submarine. There's quite a few in Hawaii. There's one on Maui, one on Oahu, and then one on the Big Island. And I worked on the one on the Big Island. And
so people would come on the submarine, and then you, as the marine naturalist, would tell them everything that they're seeing. You'd be introducing people to the ocean.
Yeah, all the time.
Wow.
And you would just see their face light up. You would see the excitement that they had about the ocean. And I realized kind of in those moments that was the best way to achieve marine conservation, was not to constantly be doom and gloom with people, where I feel like that was the kind of standard at the time, where it was like, all these awful things are happening. Here's how you can help. And so my approach to it was, here's how incredible the ocean is. Here's why you should love it. Here's also how you can help. And that's how I started becoming a science communicator.
Can you share with our viewers exactly how you use social media to educate on the topic of climate change?
Of course, I try to break down science communication, try and break down these issues to be digestible and accessible. One of the biggest barriers I find within progressing marine conservation or progressing climate policy in general is a lack of information and a lack of access for the general public. Take conferences, for example. We make conferences so inaccessible. They are incredibly expensive. You have to travel there. You have to pay for your accommodations. You have to do all of these things. And that's where this information is, right? That's where these policies are being made. And so I found that to be just this giant barrier. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to gap that barrier. I'm going to find that middle ground. And so that's kind of what I try to do. I try to first and foremost teach about the ocean, have people enjoy it, show people why it's so incredible. And then I try and break down the current issues, how people can get involved, and how people can get involved in a direct way. So how people, giving them resources to contact their representatives, giving them resources to divest their funds, giving them these direct access to actionable things that are not just, your everyday personal things. These are actionable items, as in big picture actionable items. Your voice will be heard if you do these things. And that, I think, really gets people excited. They're like, someone's going to hear me. And I'm like, I promise. If you write this in, someone's going to hear you. And that gets people really excited, I think.
That's all we secretly want, is just to be heard. That's all we're really looking for, is someone to say, yes, I hear you, and I will listen.
Exactly.
We talk about the climate space being very homogeneous, and I know that you have a big emphasis on inclusion. Do you want to talk at all about that?
Of course. I have, of course, found as I've go to conferences and as you sit on panels, you kind of sit there and you go, where am I on this panel? I don't see myself reflected at all. And you look around in the audience and you're like, I don't think these people feel how they feel they're represented. Because you look up, and I was at a conference in the beginning of March where 90% of the speakers and panelists were men. And you kind of just have this realization where you're like, we're in 2023. We need to be doing so much more to ensure inclusive diversity for just equitable decisions to be made. And so I just started advocating for my community, which of course I'm part of the LGBTQ plus community. I've advocated for LGBTQ plus folks in STEM for many, many years. And so I've just kind of taken that with me to these conferences and ensure that not just that our voices are heard, but that people are recognizing how exclusionary things really are, and how particularly for LGBTQ plus folks, right now in our current political climate, a lot of us are being ostracized, are being dehumanized, and I'd forgotten about, right? And so at these conferences where policies are being made, we need those voices heard. We need those voices not forgotten about, not dehumanized. And so at the moment, I am just showing people that. And at the conference that I went to, I ended up getting a meeting with folks from the White House and members of Parliament from Canada. And it was just something that I brought up. And it was the first day of the conference that I brought it up to these people. And the very next day, several of them came up to me and were like, as soon as you said that, I went to these panels and I was just seeing it all. And I was like, good. That's the first step, is you recognizing that there is a problem here. So we're still have a ways to go to get it to be the goal, which I see, and the goal that I want is that when people look up at a panel event, you can see yourself. And maybe it's not one person, but the pieces of your identity can be split apart with a couple of people, but that you see yourself reflected a bit and you can feel that you are represented on that stage. And that's my ultimate goal. And we still have some steps to get there, but at least we are in the process of people recognizing how inequitable things are at the moment.
How do we make those steps? Like, what are the action steps for us to be a part of that change?
I think one of the big things is what I tell people is it's not all you. I think people think that, like, you know, I'm like, you have to do all these things. No, if you just show support to people, this list that you've pulled me from, where there's 23 climate creators, there's even one from last year as well. If you look at that list and try and see some people that you might identify with and support those people, get those people into the room so that they are advocating for it, then now your community, now your voice is being heard. And you didn't have to do anything besides get on social media and show your support. So, you know, just getting people in that room that have that diversity is the first step.
Are there guidelines that you use that you think best resonate to do that with your audience?
I try to make sure that, like, things are inclusive as possible. And by that, I mean that it is something that you can do that is not going to take away too much of your energy from your everyday life. I recognize that most people are working at least 40 hours a week. They got kids, they got dogs, they have family, they have responsibilities. You know, I try and make things accessible, as in it's not, I do all of the work. I'll write it all up. All I need you to do is spend 5 minutes getting it together and sending it off and putting your comments in. You know, I try and make sure that it is easy and accessible for as many people as possible, because I recognize that not everybody has, people don't have an unlimited amount of energy, right? There are, in fact, only 24 hours in the day. And for at least 8 of those, you got to be sleeping. So
I got to write that down.
So I try to make things easy as possible for people. I try and put in the work so that it's not overbearing on people. And then that gets more people into the idea and into doing it. The more accessible you make it, the easier it is for people.
What advice would you give viewers about building a social media presence and finding a niche within the climate space?
I think listen to your audience is probably the biggest one. When I started, I was just kind of having fun, and it was really at the beginning of the pandemic where I was like, all right, we're all locked in our homes. Let me teach you something, I guess. Like, if we're all going to be sitting here, let me show you, let me teach you about the whales. Let me teach you about the coral. Let me show you why I love the ocean. And people really resonated with that. I think they could see my passion and my love for the ocean, and then really connect with that. Yep. And so kind of let your audience lead you as well, right? Like they will ask questions, they will tell you what they're enjoying, and take that, listen to them, connect with your audience, and that will kind of give you the leadway into your niche or whatever that may be. But every science communicator that I speak to, they are like, yeah, I started my career thinking that I was going to like talk about this one thing, talk about, you know, my favorite subject. But really at the end of the day, my audience wanted all of these things. So that's what I started talking about. And that's where I found residency, where I found people really connected with me. And so that's why I talk about the things that I do now. So similar to me, right? I thought it was just going to be fun and games. We get to talk about coral and I can tell you why whales jump. but there was the actions, it was the World Trade Organization, it was doing these things, giving people this information. That was when I started seeing people really connect with me. They were like, oh yeah, I have never heard a environmentalist say the things that you were saying. I've never heard an environmentalist go, oh, I don't care if you're using a plastic bag, I would rather you get involved. I recognize that you don't have a whole lot of time. I recognize you don't have a whole lot of energy. I'm going to try and give you the things that like make that simple. And it was that started connecting people. They started really understanding and resonating with me and connecting with me. So it's just let your audience guide you a little bit, and you will find your spot. It might take a minute, but it's worth it.
That's great advice. Can you leave us with a little bit of optimism?
I think we have so much to look forward to, so much to hope for. Yes, things are dire. Yes, we do need to take action right now. But we are seeing, just in general, like the amount of groups that are working on shoreline restoration, on reef restoration. We are seeing a bounce back of our coral. We are seeing the coral in Palau that has a resilience to the acidity. Okay, how do we translate that to the rest of the world? We are seeing that happen. We are seeing researchers put effort into that. There are people in Nova Scotia working diligently to restore the shoreline there that has been eroded for so many years, and putting back, eelgrass marshes. And here in British Columbia, they're putting back kelp forests. And there are so many people that are just so passionate and diligently working on this that I think there is so much hope if you just look for it a little bit.
I just wanted to thank everybody that tuned in. What an inspiring and fantastic conversation. You know how much I love information and action steps. And your next action step is to check out their website, which is climatecreatorstowatch.com. You can, all the information will be there, and we'll see you guys next time.